In today's Lent reflection, we consider a disciple being accountable to someone who knows them and helps them to grow and to live. A Sunday school teacher once asked her class the following question: "What is grey and has a long fluffy tail and lives in the tree in my garden?" A child tentatively put her hand up and said, "Well, I know the answer is Jesus, but it doesn't half sound like a squirrel." Well, of course, the answer was a squirrel, but when we're dealing with things in church, we do tend to think that the answer is always going to be Jesus. And after my last Lent reflection, you might imagine that that's where I'm going today, and I'm not. Of course, the answer isn't a squirrel either. So, what is it? For disciples today, following Jesus as our teacher, we do better if we have somebody, or more realistically across our lives, a sequence of people who share the journey, who support us, help us, challenge us, maybe teach us. And those people are people that might hold us accountable. And maybe we become people who help others and they become accountable to us. Let me give you some examples. St. Paul tells us that he had a very traditional start as the disciple of a rabbi. And he was the disciple of a rabbi called Gamaliel. Now, we still have some of Gamaliel's writings. He was the grandson of another rabbi called Hillel, and no doubt Gamaliel learned from Hillel. And Paul, probably from quite a young age, maybe 12 or 13 years old, would have lived in the vicinity of Gamaliel and learned from him. Now, Gamaliel had quite a broad, quite liberal, quite tolerant outlook. He was interested in knowing more of what was going on with Jesus and his disciples. He didn't dismiss it or condemn it in the way that some of the rabbis did. Now, we might ask ourselves, well, if we look at the journey of this young man, at the time called Saul, we don't see broad, liberal, tolerant, and interested in Jesus. Well, no. So what's happened there? Later, Paul tells us that he learned from Gamaliel, but clearly he allowed himself to be influenced by others around him, influenced by the fashionable talk in the houses around which the rabbis were, and to be influenced by what was most being said by the guys at the top, Ananias, Caiaphas. So, Saul opposed Jesus and didn't follow Gamaliel in that. And later, as Paul, after his conversion to Christianity and beginning his work as a disciple, as an apostle, teaching the Gentiles, Paul acknowledged Gamaliel's influence, and it's much more visible in him at this point later on, this influence of Gamaliel in his teaching and his willingness to take a broader view. We see an accountability relationship too in the 4th century. And I want to tell you about a succession of men, 2 of them Italians and 1 of them African. The first is called Simplicianus. And Simplicianus is a good, faithful Christian priest, teaching the faith in the city of Milan. And amongst those he taught was a young man called Ambrose. Now, Ambrose was a civil servant, and he had civic duties, he was a lawyer, he was an intelligent man, and Simplicianus taught him about the faith. And Ambrose loved to listen to what Simplicianus had to say and learn from him. And indeed, Ambrose felt that he was learning so much that he agreed to be baptized and became a catechumen. That's the name for someone who is preparing for baptism. The people of Milan needed a new bishop, and they saw their potential bishop in Ambrose, who was a man who was good with words, popular with the authorities in Milan, and in those days, the emperors of the Western Roman Empire were based there. And so they did a thing which churches in vacancy cannot now do. They saw their chosen candidate, grabbed him, and forcibly ordained him. Ambrose got through this because of Simplicianus, and he was able to become a minister who not only functioned well, but was really quite brilliant and one of the best teachers that the church has. He's known as one of the doctors of the church, and his reflections on what it means to be a priest are things that we still, many of us in holy orders, reflect on now. Our local chapter have spent a couple of chapters thinking about Ambrose's writing, about what it means to be a minister in God's church. And where did Ambrose learn it? From Simplicianus, who helped him with his learning, with his developing, with his reflecting. Ambrose, in turn, saw something special in another young teacher working in Milan, and was able to bring that young teacher to faith. And that young teacher, who learned both from Ambrose and Simplicianus, was Augustine. Augustine learned from Ambrose and realized that what he really needed was not only to be a baptized Christian, but to live a life devoting himself to prayer and study with a community of fellow learners. And he began a community first in Milan and then moving back to North Africa. And that was the roots of Augustinian monastic traditions. And his model of what it meant to live in a community as monks still influences monastic life today. And Augustine's theology and his writings still influence us as Christians today. But even once he was in Africa, and then having the similar experience to Ambrose's, Augustine, on a visit to the city of Hippo, was grabbed and forcibly ordained and made to become the Bishop of Hippo, where he was allowed to set up his monastic order in the garden of the cathedral, so that he was able to continue living monastic life while being the Bishop of Hippo. Augustine remained accountable back to Simplicianus, and many of his earliest works are written to Simplicianus, and there are many letters from him to Simplicianus. Eventually, in the year 397, Ambrose passed away and Simplicianus replaced him as Bishop of Milan just for 3 years until his own death. Those three men influenced each other, learned from each other, were accountable to each other, and their accountability to each other, their learning from each other, made them better theologians, better pastors, better ministers, better monks, and an influence that lasts to this day. Now, most of us, none of us are going to be forcibly ordained, let me reassure you, and most of us are not going to live the sorts of lives that the people I've described so far did. So what about us? Who are the people who have influenced you? And I find myself thinking about who are the people who've influenced me? Who have been those people to me in the course of my life? And as I said, there've been a succession of them, just as there were for the people I've already mentioned. Amongst those who've influenced me are a United Reformed minister called David Tatum. Now, I had more than one training incumbent as a curate. It's just the way my curacy worked out, but David was one of them. And David was the United Reformed Church minister in the church where I was a curate. And he was actually there alongside me for the whole of my curacy, taking me out with him, modelling what to do, getting me to do things and reflecting with me on what I'd done, asking me questions, sharing in study, sharing in difficult moments and joyful ones, and being a friend, and a friend whose friendship has lasted. Before him, I was deeply influenced by a mentor called Martin Reardon. Martin was a canon in the Church of England. And I knew him through the National Ecumenical Movement. He was part of the Association of Interchurch Families and the General Secretary of Churches Together in England. And he was a huge influence. He gathered me up at a time in my own life when something difficult had happened, and he encouraged me to work in ecumenism. He enabled me to experience things I'd never dreamed of, to meet people I never thought I would get to meet, to go to places I never thought I would get to go to. And he constantly encouraged, challenged, pushed, and we learned and prayed together. Martin and David helped to share the minister that I later became. And for me as a minister, I also have a relationship of accountability, like anyone who has a paid job, with the people who are up the line from me, if you like, which for me is the senior clergy in the Diocese of Peterborough. I have a relationship of accountability with the Bishop of Peterborough and with the Archdeacon of Northampton. And they are people who will challenge me, who will talk to me about the things that I struggle with and rejoice with me in the things that I think are marvellous. They will offer teaching, encouragement, and a listening ear when I need it. And what about you? Your bosses in the workplace or head teachers in school or your friends might not be those people for you, but I wonder who they are. Within the church, we have a network of spiritual directors. Sometimes those people are referred to as soul friends, people who will listen to us, who will be there and talk to us regularly to help us, not only with our spiritual lives, but with how our spiritual lives help us to be followers of Jesus 24/7 in all that we are and all that we do. If you think that might be for you, do talk to me or talk to Reverend Hilary, who is herself a spiritual director, and we'll be able to point you towards the diocesan network where they'll be able to help you to find a spiritual director of your own. Perhaps the companionship of those who are with you in church is what you need. I often think that life groups is a marvellous place to find the support that you need. After all, for us in churches, we are together. Do you remember I said before that the plural of disciple is church? We travel together and we can have a relationship of mutual accountability with our fellow church members. Once again, this is why we don't do following Jesus on our own at home. If we possibly can avoid it, we need people who pray with us and help us in the journey. Jesus sent his disciples out in pairs. He kept them in big groups and got them really talking and working together. And when they went out on mission, even on those occasions, Jesus sent them 2 by 2, says Luke. They supported each other. I think life groups are a particularly good place for this mutual support because they are a space where a group of people with a shared interest study together, pray together, and apply and think about it in the context of personal life or work life or school life. It's not just a classroom experience, but a place where we share together and share accountably. What do I mean by that? I mean that if in a life group session you say, I'm really going to try harder to pray each day, then at the next life group, your fellow members might say to you, how have you done? Did you manage to pray each day? And when you come back and go, well, not every day, but most, oh, well done. Well done. Keep on trying. I've got this prayer card that might help you. Have you seen this Bible app? And your friends in your life group will help you and support you, and you them. So I do commend life groups to you. And if you want to know more about life groups, or maybe to join one, please speak to me or to Wendy Wheeler, who coordinates our life groups at St. Peter's. Some of us are blessed to have companions in faith living with us in our households. I'm one of those people. I'm blessed to be married to a Christian man and to have Christian children. And in one sense, that means that I've got that kind of accountability set up actually in my own home. But not all of us have that. Not all of us have that particular blessing. And so church matters, because church is the place where we can find that friendship, that companionship in the journey, that accountability that we might not be able to find at home. And actually, for those of us who do have it at home, church still matters, partly because it gives us a different voice, one that might be more challenging at times, but also because we still need to be the people who are companions to others. If someone doesn't have people at home who share faith and pray with them, well, then it matters all the more that those of us who do are part of a church community, whether through the services we attend, the time at coffee afterwards, the subgroups. And I've mentioned life groups, but let me mention some others as well. Mothers' Union and social settings like tea at 2, where it's possible to sit next to a fellow Christian and have a chat with them. The Bible book group, our Monday evening or Wednesday morning service, all of those times are times when we can get together and share and support one another and offer that mutual accountability that matters to keeping us steady on our journey as disciples. Jesus joined two disciples who were sharing accountability, and they may well have been mutual friends or a married couple. We don't know, because one of them is named Cleopas and the other one is not. Was it his wife Mary? Was it someone else? We don't know. But those two people walking together, sharing an accountability, and they were joined by Jesus. And Jesus models for us, I think, in that walk as they walked to Emmaus, the destination of Cleopas and his companion. In a sense, I think Jesus really does model what it means for us to offer or receive that mutual accountability that is so important, that support that is so important on the Christian journey. First of all, Jesus walked along with the two. He walked with them. They were talking and he was there being a companion, not going, stop, but just traveling with them, sharing their journey. Secondly, he asked questions. He didn't assume he knew what was in their mind or hearts, but asked them, what are you discussing together as you walk along? And then, having asked a question, he listened to what they had to say. And it didn't matter whether they'd got it wrong or misunderstood things. He didn't interrupt. He let them get the whole of their story out. He listened. So there's Jesus, the companion, walking patiently with people, asking of them where they're at and giving them a good listening to and only then responding with help and explanation where they didn't understand, and offering the expertise he had, the insight he had. And of course, there's no better insight than what you get directly from Jesus. None of us can measure quite up to that, but we can bring what we have, what we know, what we've experienced of Jesus to others. But we bring what is the right response, having first listened. And in all of that, Jesus is completely humble. He wasn't going, look at me, it's me, I'm the resurrected Jesus, I'm the one you're worrying about, look at me. He didn't do that. He let them get to that place by themselves. He made sure that they were able to be ready to receive the revelation of his presence for themselves. He wasn't pushy, he wasn't showy, he was utterly and totally humble. And when they were ready, when they'd listened to the person who was with them and come to that understanding, then they were able to see, it's you. And then they were able to act on it and take their own discipleship, indeed even apostleship, back on as they went back to Jerusalem to share their story with the other disciples and apostles. In our confirmation course, which is based on the model of this story, every confirmation candidate has alongside them an Emmaus companion, someone whose job is to walk the journey with the confirmation candidate, to pray for them, to listen to them, maybe to ask them what they need. And having asked, having listened, having prayed, maybe sometimes to offer their stories, their insights, and then to be there humbly, celebrating the achievement and the next steps of the person they are accompanying. Not going, look at me, but saying, well done you. We could all do with a companion like that, couldn't we? And many of us can be those companions to others as well. We have it set up in a formal way for those who are on the confirmation course, but there's nothing stopping us looking amongst the friendship of our church for people that can be that to us. Perhaps asking people, would you pray with me? Can I talk to you? Would that be all right? It's a humble, gentle, faithful, quiet companionship with someone to whom we are accountable, who helps us to grow and to live. And what a privilege when we get to be the person who does that for someone else, who helps someone else to grow and to live. In the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a passage which is very often read at weddings, but it's not about marriage. It's about the importance of traveling together, of sharing in the journey, and of having that accountability. And I think it describes two people on a journey. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. 2 are better than 1, and a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken, for wherever 2 or 3 pray together, God is with them. And so that companionship of 2 becomes 3 because God is with us. And so a disciple is someone who is accountable to someone else, who helps them to live and grow, and together the disciple and the disciple's Emmaus companion are drawn together and bound by God, who is always our companion on the journey.